Good evening to all. Today I'll be taking a session on the flora on sea beach. So there are different types of flora. This is very interesting session because we are going to see different types of vegetation, why are they different, and then what is the need for the study on the flora of sea beach. So let's go forward to the different vegetation. So these are some of the vegetation you will find in the sea beach. These are beachfront. You will find sand dune. You will find mangrove forest or the intertidal swamps, mangrove associated vegetation, littoral forest, salt marsh vegetation, and then at some you will also find the seagrass beds. So when we talk about the beachfront, so these are the vegetation you will find that is just lying along the sea beach. So this is a very important type of vegetation. Again, why? Because this is the first line of vegetation you will find after the sea water or the ocean water. So they are going to first face the sea salt spray. They are going to face the different tidal waves, and then they are going to face the high wind velocity or the low change in the wind velocity. And then when it comes to natural calamities, they are the first vegetation that will be encountered with all this stress that is formed in the sea beach. So this is again the very important vegetation when it comes to the flora of sea beach. Then the next is the sand dune. So sand dune and sea beachfront, they are not exactly the different vegetation, but then you will see a very thin boundary line of or boundary invincible boundary between the beachfront and the sand dune, because the first vegetation that you will find is the beachfront, then followed by the sand dune. So many of the vegetation that are found in the sand dune might be available even in beachfront, but not necessarily. Some of the species are very specific, and they are found only in beachfront sometimes, and those plants that are found in sand dune, those are very specific to the sand dune that you will not find in the beachfront. So there are some limitations, and then you will also find plants that are found in both the vegetation. So talking about the mangroves, uh, when we say mangroves or the intertidal swamps, those are the actual areas, or those are the areas where beaches, they merges between the estuaries and lagoons, and such kinds of vegetation. In such types of vegetation, the salt water, they remain all the time with a high or low velocity of winds, and the they are mostly covered with the tidal flooding and saline wetlands. So most of the time they are affected by the tidal waves. So again, mangroves are an important type of wetlands that are named all over the world. So the mangrove plants or vegetation, they are very important because they are adapted in a different way. They are adapted so that the roots are adapted in such a way that they have got pneumatophores, uh, and then other adaptations you will find in the mangrove plants. But in the mangrove associated plants, they do not have such specialized adaptations, but near to the mangrove forest, they can also adapt to some of the harsh conditions, and they can grow well near the mangrove forest. So those are those kind of vegetation comes under the mangrove associated vegetation. Next is the littoral forest. So these littoral forests, they come behind the mangrove forest, or maybe behind the sand dunes. So these forests you will find with many of the tree species, and when you compare with beachfront and sand dune flora, those plants mostly are creepers. You will find herbs, you will find shrubs, that that forms like a mat, especially when it comes to the beachfront. You will find mats or creepers growing to bind the sand. And when it comes to littoral forest, you will find bigger shrubs, you will find bigger trees in the littoral forest. So in all this vegetation, sometimes yes, in beachfront you will also find trees such as casuarina, and we'll come to that. But most of the time you will find herbs in the beachfront and sand dune. In sand dune you will also find climbers, you will also find shrubs, but in littoral forest you will find most of them are shrubs or trees. And in salt marsh vegetation, which is near to the sand dune area. So in such kind of vegetation you will find uh, herbs, and then most of the time you might find parasitic plants, you might find carnivorous plants, because they need an environment where nutrients are very low, or stress conditions are developed. So such kinds of salt marsh vegetations are the areas, are the vegetations where there is a lot of stress because of the salt uh, flooding area. And then the water might go down sometimes, and then sometimes it might be flooded to a certain uh, period of time. So these areas are uh, affected by the tidal waves again. So we will see. You see, the seafront is how this is. So you can see the type of vegetation, the kind of creeper, or you can say binding the sand, the herbs, forming a mat-like structure on the beach. So such kinds of plants are very important, because it helps the face to face the stress created by the salt spray. And then you will find that because of such plants, it helps to prevent sand erosion. So these kind of plants are very important in sea beach. So in this figure you will see where the and which kinds of plants you will find. In the seagrass you will find in the sea itself with shallow water. And then the beachfront you will find many of the creepers, you will find many of the herbs that actually helps to bind the sand. So like I said, in sand dune flora, this comes, sorry, after the beachfront. And in sand dune you will also find different types of dunes, which are the primary species, secondary species, and tertiary species. These are the type of differentiation we can make, because in primary species you will find grasses and creepers in the incipient dune. In the fourth dune you will find a little bigger plants, such as small shrubs. And then behind that you will find hind dune, and here you might find bigger trees. So sometimes in this sand dune you will find a salt marsh vegetation sometimes. So these are plain places where you will find many of the herbs or very less plants you will find in such kind of vegetation. So we'll show you how it is. So you will find sea grasses in the shallow water like this, and then like I had discussed about the mangroves. So these are the plants. These are the kind of habitat where the sea beaches it merges with the estuaries and lagoons, and they are the places where it keeps on flooding, and they are affected by always different tidal waves, and the plants are very differently adapted, such so as to grow with the different tidal waves. They have got new metaphors for that. So you will find different kind of vegetation in the near the sea beach. So today, particularly, we will study about the beachfront and sand dune. They have got a very similar kind of vegetation, and then flora also. Many of them are commonly seen in both the vegetation, but there is a very thin line of differences you will find uh, with a very unique plants in particularly different vegetation. So in sea beach, like I said, the plants they have to encounter uh, you know different stress conditions. They are directly exposed to the salt spray and the tidal influence. So, but the sand dune plants, on the other hand, they can tolerate the different shifting of the sand, the different exposure to high wind, and then sometimes it might also get flooded. So the species you will find in sea or beachfront is the Ipomia pescaprae, Spinifex litorius, Hydrophylex maritima, Lonia sarmentosa, Cyperus conglomeratus. So you will find such kinds of species in the beachfront. Some examples of sand dune flora are Solanum trilobatum, which is a climber you will find especially in the sand dune habitat, and then you will also find Eugenia roxburghi. This is a very specific plant for sand dune, and this is a tree, and you will I'd like to tell you that there is another Eugenia species like Eugenia uniflora, which is not native to India, but Eugenia roxburghi is native to India, and then it is very important species for the sand dune, this Eugenia roxburghi. And then some associated plants for sand dune may include Clerodendron iname, and then Carnavalia rosea. Carnavalia rosea you will find in the sand dunes habitat. So we will see one by one what are the plants we had discussed earlier. So the most important plant for the beachfront is Spinifex litorius. This is a very important plant, and we can say this is a type of grass from the family Poaceae. And all the beachfront plants, because they are already present in a stress environment, it helps them to uh, you know mm, provide more secondary metabolites, which in turn help us to use it as a different medicinal uses properties. It has got different medicinal properties. So Spinifex litorius is a very important beachfront plant or the grass. So you might not find this in many of the beaches, or we can say every species or every vegetation is different in different areas or in different beaches. But I'm talking particularly in for Odisha. and we can go ahead for plantation of such plants because these plants are native to India, and we can grow, we can plant such plants. This will actually help for the prevention of soil erosion. So we can definitely choose such kinds of plants. The next plant is Hydrophilix maritima. Like I have earlier seen you the mat-like formation in front of the beach. So this is from the family Rubiaceae, and this plant also have got medicinal uses, like this use for the treatment of rheumatic problems. And like I had shown you earlier, this is how it forms a mat in the sea beach, and it uh, protects the sand. So the next species I'm showing you here is Lonia sarmentosa. This is again an important beachfront plant, and it is not as common as the earlier plant I have shown you, but yes, this is also an important plant of the beachfront. And then again, this plant is also used in the urinary infections, as described by the local people. So yes, there are different types of sedges that I have observed myself in the beach area, and then this is again another cyperaceae or the sedges that I have found. This is Fimbricidis sericea. Uh, this again grows in a mat-like uh, structure on the beach front. So this actually helps to grab the sand. So we can work on this plant in future to understand its bioactive compounds, or its medicinal values, if there is any. So we can work on this. The next plant is Cyperus arenarius. So again, this is from the family Cyperaceae, and in this photo you can see I have shown a uh, single plant, but in actual I have seen the plant spreading and then forming like a mat. So these leaves are going to keep on spreading from the knots, and then it will form a mat-like structure. So this is very important. Again, another plant of the beachfront is Ipomia pescaprae, and from the family Convolvulaceae. So this plant helps to stabilize, high BPs or hypertension. So this is not a a specific or true beachfront plant, because you will also find this plant in nearby coastal areas. So not only in sand dune, but you will also find in the other areas other than the sand dune and the beachfront. So the next plant is Platostoma menthoides. Uh, this plant is not very commonly found in the beachfront, as I had observed. And then this plant, yes, it has got medicinal value, that it is used for fever and cough. But all these species are native, and we can actually go for plantation, especially in the sandy, in the beach area, in many of the beaches of India. So the let's see the vegetation of sand dune. The first plant, like I had mentioned, is Solanum trilobatum, which is a climber. You will find in the sand dune, and this plant is again useful in respiratory problems. So this is again a very important plant of the sand dune, because it's very commonly found in the sand dune. So the next plant is Eugenia roxburghi, which I had mentioned earlier. This is a tree, and this is again a native species. So this plant is very important because it is also useful in gastrointestinal problems, but more than that, it is a native species, and people are looking out for plantation programs, which plants to be planted. And rather than planting any plant, we have to consider what are the plants that are suitable for a particular vegetation, particular habitat. So this plant is very important when it comes to plantation in the uh, sand dune area, and again it is a native plant, so that's why we can make a strong patches of such plants in these areas to protect from different natural calamities. The next plant is Polycarpa corymbosa. This you will find in sand dune, and is useful in the treatment of jaundice. And this plant is not always specific to the sand dune, because I have seen myself found in other places, in other coastal regions which are not sand dune. So you will find in many places. It's a you can say a varied habitats you can find. The next plant is Pedalium murex, and this plant is used in cuts and wounds. So the plant is also important, because this plant you will not only find in the sand dune area, but also you will find in the other coastal regions. The next plant is Canavalia rosea, and this is from the family Fabaceae, and you will find this plant in sand dune, which is also useful to treat respiratory problems. So the next climber you will find Caesalpinia bonduc. So the present name of this plant is Guilandina bonduc of the family Fabaceae, and you will find that the seeds of this plant is useful for the treatment of fever. And this plant is again not particularly uh, mm, find only in sand dune, but also you will find in other coastal regions. The next plant is Casuarina equisetifolia from the family Casuarinaceae. So the plant has got medicinal uses for the treatment of diarrhea, but on top of the medicinal uses, what is very important is that this is a native tree species which you will find in the seafront, beachfront, you will find in the sand dune, in many of the coastal regions you will find. So when this plant makes a thick uh, barrier, so it helps to protect the heavy winds or during natural calamities. At that time, this tree help to protect the area. So plantation of this plant is again very much necessary in many of the coastal regions. So because it is again a native species, and it uh, helps as a barrier to protect the coastal areas. So that is how it got protected. So the next plant is Calophyllum inophyllum from the family Calophyllaceae. So again, this is a tree species that you will find in sand dune as well as nearby coastal regions. So the plant is again used for the treatment of gonorrhea. So the next plant is Aloe-Casuarina littoralis from the family Casuarinaceae. But it's important to know that this species is not native to India, and you will find this species in Australia. It's native to Australia, so somehow people might have introduced it here. But the problem is when we introduce some other species, then sometimes it might be possible that it becomes invasive, or it affects the native plants. So better that we plant only the native species. The next plant here is Opuntia stricta from the family Cactaceae, and you will find this plant in sand dune, and it's useful for the treatment of boils. So, like I said, many of the species that you will find in beachfront might also be found in sand dune, and some plants that are found in sand dune might also be found in beachfront. So, the similar plants or the common plants that are found in both sides, the vegetation we're going to see. So the first one is Spinifex litorius. You will find in both the vegetation. Ipomia pescaprae. You will find in both the area. Solanum trilobatum, Casuarina equisetifolia, uh, Gloriosa superba, Amania basifera. So all these species you will find in both the vegetation, and it's very important. So when it comes to threats, let's see what are the important threats that we should consider. The first one is Grevillea terridifolia. I've observed myself that the plant is, grown or introduced uh, in many of the areas or the coastal areas, but this species is not native to India, and in future this might create some other effects, secondary effects that dominates over the native species, or that this creates other allylochemical, they might produce other allylochemical properties that you know that reduces the other or affects the other species. So this I have seen in a lot of population. The next species is Grevillea robusta. Again, this is not a native species to India, and we might avoid planting such species. So when it comes to invasive species like Cromolena odorata, so the area where it is, you will find a lot of Chromelina odorata. You will not find many of the native species. So this dominates over the native species. So we have to make sure that such kinds of invasive species are removed, and in place of these plants we can plant many of the native species that I have mentioned. And then Acacia auriculiformis, not native, uh, and sometimes it is prone to fire. And then Acacia mendium, not a native species, and again it's an invasive plant. So we have to understand some of the conservation strategies for the protection of the beach floor. So we can create a strategy and then guidelines for the protection of the beach. So we can restrict many of the construction, we can restrict sand mining and then sand extractions and the disturbances created by tourism related services. So we can create a guideline so that everything is done in a proper way, not affecting the habitat of such plants. And then restoration and revegetation, which is the we can implement the plantation of the native plants, especially of the particular habitat, like you can go for plantation of Ipomia pescaprae, Spinifex litorius, Lonia sarmentosa, and many other species these are we can go for plantation, restoration, and revegetation. So apart from that, it is also important that we should remove invasive plants, and in place of such invasive plants, we can always go for the plantation of the native communities, native plant communities of the particular habitat that we have discussed. So that's all for today. Thank you.